Our next presenter is one of our esteemed colleagues from across the Pacific, Kieran King. Kieran is the Global Vice President of Loyalty Strategy here at Skillsoft. Kieran started her career working for private companies to build curriculums, implement learning management systems, conduct needs analysis, and analyse return on investment. I'm sure all of those topics are near and dear to all of your hearts. Kieran has been with Skillsoft for the last 16 years, where she has worked with and consulted for various Fortune 500 organisations globally as they made the transition from the classroom to blended learning models. Kieran has authored several methodologies and white papers, and she regularly speaks at conferences and webinars globally. She also is very familiar with this stage that we have in Sydney, has been a presenter at many Perspectives events. Love having Kieran down here, and for those of you who have been a part of visits with Kieran or been involved with sessions with Kieran, she always leaves our audience with some powerful takeaways, and I'm sure she's going to do the same here this afternoon. So please welcome Kieran King.
It's a lot of pressure. You're welcome. Well, thanks for having me back. It is a joy to be here, and it was so special this morning, wasn't it? Every single one of the speakers and presenters offered so much insight and inspiration, so I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Everybody who comes across the Pacific has a travel story, so I'm going to warm things up after lunch with my travel story. Last year I came here, and unfortunately my luggage did not arrive. Now, every woman in the room who was aware of that said, "Oh, aren't you lucky? You get to go out and buy new clothes." And I walked, a few feet into Meijer, had sticker shock, and was completely freaked out by the whole entire experience, and it was very stressful. So, for those of you who've not met your luggage at your arrival, you know what I'm talking about. This year, coming over, the 17-hour leg of my journey, you know what you do on an airplane when it's a long flight, right? You look to the seat next to you and you just hope what you get is okay. So I was in that same boat, and I thought, I had already been, 6 or 7 hours in flight. I get to LA, it's 2 a.m. to my body, and next to me comes walking in a middle-aged man, just like me, middle-aged, and he had, no kidding, head-to-toe pajamas of Mountain Dew, the beverage, bright green, and he proceeded to wiggle his way in, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe a grown man would actually wear pajamas onto an airplane, but I get it. We're going to be doing a lot of sleeping. He then proceeded to open up his parcel, and he whipped out a 6-pack of Mountain Dew and a family-size bag of beef jerky. Then he proceeded to put the earbuds into his, and when someone does this, you're now a part of their musical repertoire. So he puts the earbuds in and proceeds to go to sleep, and the only 3 tracks on his playlist were heavy metal. So I'm still trying to figure out which part of all that, last year, losing my luggage, or this year, experience with a gentleman in my seat row, was more travel traumatic. But I got here just fine, and so did my luggage this year. I am here to talk to you today about a curiosity that is on the hearts and minds of all of our customers, which is, what is this thing that people keep talking about called analytics? You heard it this morning. How do I do that? What do I do? What exactly and precisely does that mean? What does it look like in action? So what we're going to do today, and I know you're delighted, an hour of someone talking to you about analytics directly after lunch, but I promise there'll be some participation, some networking during this hour. But we're going to talk about why this is such an imperative for our field. We're also going to talk about the mechanics of the process. So I'm going to deconstruct and hopefully demystify for you what analytics looks like. And then what we're going to do is, this is a conference. You're supposed to leave with new ideas, and you're supposed to implement a lot of the ideas you have harnessed in this room and take them back to the workplace. So the last chapter of this segment today is all about what you can do in order to advance your analytics agenda, no matter where you happen to be. Sound like a plan? Good, 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 good. So, why talent analytics? Why is there so much buzz about this? And I firmly believe the answer is very simple. For us, all of our organizations roughly spend about 40% of our total revenues on our talent. That's the biggest line item in any organization. But yet, do we really know if that investment is invested wisely? Do we know exactly if those dollars are being put to best use? Now, you can sit there and weigh how that question lands on you personally, thinking about your own organization. But the collective research, the industry at large, John referenced the D plus and the C minus. The industry at large is saying we're doing a terrible job. Absolutely no. We really don't understand how the people investments are contributing to the business. It poses a big credibility problem for our field. And unfortunately, the largest line item that we could be looking after are people investment. Those decisions, the most profound decisions that can be made with reference to our talent, hiring, promoting, developing, are largely made on gut feel, personal supposition, and a lot of corporate belief systems. It's not science. We also know intuitively, and it's common sense, that analytics will trump any kind of intuition each and every time. In fact, as this statistic shows us, organizations that regularly use analytics to inform their decisions are 5 times better at their performance than those at the bottom of the stack. And it's also no coincidence whatsoever that organizations who use data to drive decisions also receive better stock performance. There's no coincidence there. 30% on average better stock performance for organizations that use data to make decisions. And then lastly, as far as learning and development, there's research that says organizations that apply learning analytics to improve their function are 3 times better. So those are the top deck performers. They're performing 3 times as well as those at the bottom of the heap, those peers. So the case is there, but then how do we do it? And when you think about analytics, there's one company that comes to mind quite easily, and that's Google. Good reason for that. Silicon Valley company, synonymous often with the term analytics. And Google applies the same exact rigor and science toward its people decisions as it does its engineering ones. In fact, there's a great video on the Skillsoft, as part of the Skillsoft portfolio, that talks about the fact that any decision, no matter how great or how small, within Google is made with a fact base. And you will be challenged if you present an idea and you can't back it up with data. This has put them in a place of being able to say and declare that every single employee at Google contributes about $1 million in revenue and $200,000 in profit. That would be so nice to be able to do that, wouldn't it? Be really nice. What a kudo for HR. But there's a lot of ungoogly among us. As this slide illustrates, only about 2% of organizations in this research from Towards Maturity, a UK-based learning and talent analyst firm, 2% are actually practicing with good measure the analytics principles. But the good news is about 35% of the respondents in the survey intended to do more. I certainly hope that doesn't fall by the wayside of eating better and more exercise. Now, this is another way to think about it. When you really conceive of why would I want to embark on a talent analytics expedition, it's about avoiding accidental wisdom. Sure, there's plenty of times when you get it right. You hire the best candidate from that hire pool. You promote the next rising star that takes his or her business unit to the next level in terms of performance and profitability. But all too often, those are accidents. We're lucky we got it right. So talent analytics enables us to produce a fact base in which to make these decisions and to make them more correctly as we go forward. Now, we were so curious about this topic because you were curious about this topic. And Skillsoft, as you know, is not just here to help you in your content provision and your platform provision. We're here to help you understand what it is that can build capabilities way beyond the product. And talent analytics was something you were telling us that you were curious about. So we went out and contacted 5 different subject matter experts, and I'm going to share with you their insights in the balance of the session. The first was one of my favorite people. He is a renegade when it comes to human capital analytics. His name is Gene Peace. He founded a company called Vestrix, and he's written 2 books on Books 24/7 on the analytics practice within HR. Shreya Sakar Barney is another one of my personal heroes. She happens to be the founder of Human Capital Growth and also a scholar at UC Berkeley. And then Anshul Sapuri, he is the IBM big data scientist that we've been partnering with over the last 2 years in order to bring about those really neat algorithms that personalize the experience and provide those predictive recommendations. He's the only master inventor I will ever meet. I'm confident of that. He's absolutely lovely. The fourth was the head of research and measurement design at CEB. We heard Gary quote CEB earlier. And then, of course, we had to have someone that we consulted with that kind of gave us some conjecture, a little bit of fight in the conversation and challenged us, and that was Lori Reutman, and she's an aficionado in all things HR. Now, when we asked these subject matter experts, why exactly would someone want to embark on a talent analytics journey? It was very simple. All of them gave us very consistent answers. The first was to increase the evidence-based judgments that they make to inform better decisions. Very easy. The second, which I believe is equally powerful, is to move from what HR tends to do sometimes, which is spray and pray. You know, let's get everybody into this program. Let's have everybody go through this talent process. It moves, just like we were speaking about this morning, to instead of equally distributing our efforts and our dollars, let's do it intelligently. Not everyone is made the same, so thus, they shouldn't be developed the same. They shouldn't be promoted the same. So this allows us to be highly prescriptive and personalized in what we do as an HR community. Now, the mechanics of the process, how do we deconstruct this? What does it look like when it gets done? It's really not as scary as you might think. Now, the first thing that one must do when embarking on a talent analytics journey is not anything to do with a spreadsheet. You don't even open a computer, and you don't invite a data geek to the conversation. The first thing you have to do is create, on a piece of paper or a whiteboard, what's called a very simple measurement map. And this was also something that each and every one of our subject matter experts told us was critical. Too many people go out and they start to buy things and they start to work on exercises for talent analytics without pausing to ask themselves, what is it? What is my hypothesis that I believe that I want to prove out, or I want to see how much one variable influences the other? Now, a measurement map is not crazy complex. It's really simple. It really intuitively helps us move from this fuzzy linkage between people investments and strategic investments to something that depicts the logical relationships between what we're doing in HR and what the business needs to achieve. Now, there are 4 different segments in this connected chain when you're building a measurement map. The first, and we always begin with the end in mind, is understanding quite clearly what are the strategic goals that my organization is responsible for delivering. The second are the business results that are going to support those strategic goals. And we'll unpack each one of these in a moment. The third segment was kind of a new concept for me. It's the concept of a leading indicator inside your organization. And then last but not least, your people investments. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at each one of these 4 segments in the measurement map and talk about why it's important and give you examples so that you can correlate the types of HR investments and energies and resources that you're applying into your own measurement map. Okay, people investments. This is what we do. Anything that we are propping up in order to support the business from a people perspective is a people investment. So things like all the learning programs that you may have from Skillsoft Corporation, all the mentoring programs that you have. You also may have recognition or reward programs like we discussed this morning. You could also have compensation plan processes, succession pathways, performance management processes. This is literally our playbook for what we do within HR. Now, a leading indicator, maybe a new term, a leading indicator is something that suggests whether or not your people investment is on the right track. So it is something that is an early hint, a symbol, a sign that either your hypothesis is correct or it needs to be reconstructed. So this is probably one of the most salient pieces in a measurement map. Examples of a leading indicator could be things like employee engagement scores. We talked about that a lot this morning. The number of promotions that you've delivered that year. The outcome of your performance appraisal. Your level 1, level 2 learning evaluation results. Another great example. Customer sat ratings. And then, of course, maybe the number of different cases that your customer service reps are addressing inside their department. That's a leading indicator example. The third element in the measurement map is the business results. And you know this, as well as everyone on stage referenced them. They're the KPIs. There's about 14 to 15 different departments and functions inside any enterprise that are evergreen, and they all have pretty standard KPIs that need to be hit. These are tied to financial value, whereas leading indicators are not necessarily correlated into dollars. These kinds of examples would be expressed as employee turnover rates. Mornay said this morning, it costs us 100% of that salary to replace that individual. We can monetize that pretty readily. A second would be where I live, in renewal rates and ensuring customer longevity. New sales volume, another example, workers' comp costs, and of course, if we're able to mitigate any kind of risk to the organization. It's an example of a business result, and there are numerous others. And then the strategic goals are surprisingly simple. When we talk about the strategic goals of a company, we often forget how very simple they are. Most organizations want to make money, save money, and do well with the customer experience. And that is about as simple as it gets. Now, when it comes to seeing this plotted out in an example, I think it becomes quite clear why it's important before embarking on any analytics journey to make sure that you have your map constructed correctly. So to give you an example, if we look at the 4 different segments in the measurement map, we're going to begin with the end in mind. In this particular measurement map, we want to improve our financial performance and improve or enhance the customer satisfaction or customer experience. Well, obviously, if we're going to make a dent in improving financial performance, we want to reduce cost and eliminate any waste or redundancy inside the organization. In this particular example, I'm going to do that in 2 ways. I'm going to have applied strategies to reduce my turnover. And of course, I'm going to train and skill up the customer experience through the customer call center in order to save some cost too, as well as influence the customer experience. Now, the leading indicators for these types of business results could be numerous. You see a lot of them here on the screen. The number of development plans, the number of appraisals, absentee rates, employee engagement scores. a customer NPS value. And then, believe it or not, this, knowing exactly what kind of leading indicators you're wanting to influence and the business results you want to drive, that should be where your hypothesis starts. What people investments in tools, technologies, content, process do we need to apply in order to influence that downstream goal of business performance? Again, no spreadsheet required, no data head in the room, but this is an overlooked step that is absolutely essential before you embark on a deeper level of your journey. Now, there are 5 different steps when you actually unpack or deconstruct the process of talent analytics. I challenged it because I thought it was going to be harder than it was. And I think that there's simplicity in these 5 steps, and there's a lot of work and perspiration that goes in to every single one of them. Having said that, they're not scary. The first is to review your hypothesis. So why is it that you're making a talent investment? The second is to compile the data, naturally. You're going to have to do that from lots of different systems. The third is to analyze that data. The fourth is to interpret the findings and present them to your stakeholders, is the fifth. That sounds way too simple. The bit in the middle is hard. So let's go through a little bit of an example of how these 5 steps relate back to the measurement map, which provides you with a compass to fill in a lot of the next steps. For the hypothesis that you have, you would refer back to the people investment element or segment of your measurement map. For the compiling the data, we're going to go right to the leading indicators and right to the business results, and we're going to start to identify what are the data sources that I need to have access to in order to identify which leading indicators are going to be part of my equation and business results. So as an example, if you surmised that your organization was going to enhance its performance appraisal and development planning process in order to support a reduction in turnover, which will thus decrease cost as well as increase customer satisfaction, that could be an example hypothesis. You're going to have to run out and you're going to have to get data. We talked about Elixir being a great way to glue all of this disparate data into and stitch it together into one elegant piece of software. The examples of data sources you'd have to get to test this hypothesis are pretty straightforward. Your performance and development data, your comp data, payroll, customer experience metrics. Now, if you put that all into the magic machine and apply expertise, either a human being or software, to analyze the results, the question you're going to be ending with is, did I see a reduction in cost? And did I see an improvement in the customer experience? That's that 4th step in the 5-step equation. When you present the findings, they're going to sound like this. Our strengthened and enhanced development planning process produced a reduction in turnover that equated to $4 million and a 9% improvement in the promoter quotient of our NPS. That is a gift to business leaders when we can say that. And that's what talent analytics really involves, those 5 steps. Now, you may be thinking, well, that sounds ambitious and that sounds really exciting. That would be great if I could do that, but I can barely do enough level 1 and level 2, maybe level 3 on occasion, types of measurements within my organization. I'm sure that's on your mind. So what does the introduction of analytics mean for the tried and true construct of learning evaluation? This is what it means. Evaluation methods that have been trusted and tried and true for the last 50 years were constructed at a time when what organizations were producing were tangible assets. They were manufactured resources. That model is still applicable, but the world has changed. 50 years ago, it wasn't uncommon to see an employee stay inside an organization for 30 years, 25 years, get the watch, eat the cake, ride off into the sunset and play golf, right? That was normal. That was absolutely normal. And when the fifth level was introduced by Jack Phillips in the late 1990s, kind of rocked the Kirkpatrick equation a bit because it introduced some pretty provocative things. Number one, it introduced isolation. So all those people who could say, well, I can't isolate training's effect over other variables, Jack and Patty did that through a 10-step process in their methodology. The other thing it introduced was the concept of payback, which caused HR a little bit of a shudder because we'd not been communicating our impact in such a way. Today is a very different landscape. You heard a lot about that this morning. The traditional models of the Kirkpatrick-Phillips 5 steps, 5 levels, still have relevance. They still apply. But think about the type of employee that we deal with today, the mobility, the expectations for promotions. They're very dynamic behaviors, sometimes erratic behaviors in our employees. They certainly don't have tenure like we used to see. I think the average was quoted this morning as 3 years. Really? I've been at Skillsoft 16. It makes me ancient. And traditional levels and traditional approaches to learning evaluation will not cut it in the dawn of the talent era. So evaluation, some say, is going to a new level. So all of you who are very familiar with the 5 levels, and by the way, counting consumption is 0. If it's a shock, I can get you a glass of water after the session. But if all you're doing is counting utilization, you are 0. Some of us are doing some good work at level 1 and level 2, and now here I am on the stage telling you there's a lot of talk within the space about a formal level 6, which is predictive analytics. Why? Because we have to go here. We absolutely have to go here. We have to move off the dime because our businesses and the talent sphere in general demands more and deserves more. So don't fret. Here's the good news. Whilst we all look at these levels as a sequential, for heaven's sakes, they have numbers. Of course we're looking at them sequentially. They've always had numbers for 50, 60 years. So here's the interesting thing that the subject matter experts told us. You don't need to be chained to do measurement in a sequential way. You can hop skip, as my 9-year-old says, over to predictive analytics without doing any of the earlier levels of evaluation at all, which is great. It's chains unbinding. Now, it's about doing it. This is a tough climb. I talked to you about the 5 different steps. It looks really easy. It's not. The bits in the middle, the bookends are the easy part. The hypothesis and the reporting stakeholders. It's the bits in the middle that are really tough. I love this illustration because it's the emotion that it portrays that really communicates to you what it looks like to advance. This is a mountain, obviously. At the base of the mountain, you can see what a lot of folks do, which is they kind of sell the story of learning and development in HR in a way of sharing anecdotes. And anecdotes and testimonials are great, but they're not going to be sufficient. So then a lot of organizations move to scorecards and dashboards. There's a lot of organizations who just put things in Excel, make a chart out of it, and call it a dashboard. It's not going to cut it. But I think they're pretty proud when they go home that they have created a dashboard. But when we move to that next level, we go to benchmarking. Benchmarking is really the opportunity to take intervals of your data and compare them across functions or compare them against reporting periods. But then we get into the tricky things. In the dark blue, we get into correlations. So what is the relationship of one variable that I'm doing as it relates to another variable that I'm doing? Is there a connection between the two? Or is there a complete divorce and no relationship between the two? That's correlation. Now you see a completely different color and an altitude shift and a rope when we go up to the next level. The rope is my metaphor for it's really hard. It is really hard to move from correlation to causation, and we're going to talk about that. This is where it separates those who are going to do this and do it well from those who are going to plan to do this. Going into isolation and causation is a completely different game, and I'll share with you statistically how many of us are actually there on that side of the mountain. When we can do isolation and causation quite readily, then we get into predictive analytics, and when we get into a routine of doing that, we're in an optimized state. Very few get there, except for that man on the mountain, going like this. Good for him. But guess what? The view at the bottom is not so hot. But the view of the gentleman up at the top, with his arms up in the air, his view is better. So it's worth the climb. Now, the causation part of the climb, the rope. Maybe the rope you want to go, wrap it around somebody's neck when you get into causation conversations. This is the tough stuff. Now, I'll share with you what causation really looks like. It is isolating the impact of a talent intervention that establishes causation. The other is that it benefits us because it enables us to forecast what we should be doing in the future based on the patterns and behaviors of what's happened in the past. Now, this is exactly and precisely the science that's going into the big data algorithms at Skillsoft, right? We took 13 trillion different bits of data, enormous amounts of data, studied it, looked at what story it was telling, and now we're able to provide predictive recommendations. This is exactly what the retail space does in order to determine what kind of product they need to put on the shelves in what quantity at what time of the year. So the retail space has been doing it for a very long time. It's just time for HR to catch up. Causation has 3 criteria statistically. Shocker, the cause must precede the effect. There's your MBA in statistics right there. There also must be a correlation. Remember, correlation precedes causation. And then the other is that you need to eliminate other hypotheses. Those are the 3 criteria for causation. Isolating variables to get to causation is tough stuff, and it involves a lot of work. Alignment to business outcomes must precede. Statistical skills have to be part of when you get up to that larger level on the mountain, that higher state. You cannot get there without statistical skills. It's absolutely a non-starter. Third, you have to have great rapport with those outside your function, and you have to start to ask for data that is way outside the sphere of the HR community. So, with that said, I'm going to give you some ideas for different ways in which you can begin your part of the journey if you're so interested in making a big step forward. In order for you to determine where your organization needs to go, you must first have a baseline of where you're operating at today. This is a Deloitte University model, and this is a great way, it's a maturity framework, to be able to discern where your organization is currently operating. Down at the bottom, reactive. These are the knee-jerk red phone requests for information and data and reports that you put in a spreadsheet and send off to the requester. A lot of the reports don't have relationships to one another, and it's a very responsive, reactive approach to data. It's also not heavily analyzed. So it's reported out, but it's not digested and internalized in terms of what is the data saying. That represents today 56% of organizations. 56%, more than half. The second level, which represents 30% of our larger industry community, is called a more proactive response. In this case, an organization is starting to anticipate the needs of its data requesters before they ask. They're starting to pull things together relative to dashboards, and they're starting to connect data points, and they're starting to produce more analysis. So So again, 30%. If we add the 56 and the 30 together, that means the far, far, far majority, 86% of us, are at the lower end of the mountain. The top part of the mountain, where there was that purple color, is represented by level 3 and level 4. 14% operate at the top part of the mountain. The third level of maturity is called strategic analytics. It requires statistical capability. You cannot get here without it. And it's where you begin to construct people models. You begin to really understand correlation and causation. You begin to understand root causes of what is going on within your workforces and provide remedies on what to do about it. When you get up to level 4, somebody has a dog in the room. When we get up to level 4, predictive analytics, at this point, you have earned a seat at the table because now you can anticipate and mitigate risk that might be dangerous for the organization relative to its workforce health. You are also an integral part of workforce planning and strategic planning overall. 4% of the world today is there. Now, you may be thinking, maybe somebody fibbed when they said that they were a level 4 because I haven't seen a level 4. I'm going to show you what a level 4 looks like. And that's by sharing with you a story from one of our customers, Sears. Sears is a retailer, very popular retailer, part of the American culture. They sell everything from baby clothes and lawn mowers to small appliances. And they recently got into the business, and I bought from them, in large appliances, kitchen appliances. And they established, and today the move is going away from brick and mortar operations, right? Well, Sears decided that when it came to large appliances, it was going to establish these retail properties, and you would engage with someone who helped you love your large appliance. And in order to develop this love culture with your appliance, they had to have employees that got in the mood. Do you get in the mood when you think large appliance? Maybe that's too much information. But what Sears did was absolutely blazing a new trail. What Sears did is they combined lots of customer data, operations data, sales data, and customer service data into a predictive model. And how did they do it? Very simple, very clever. When people came to the retail establishment to pimp those large appliances, they had to punch in a time card. And on that time card, they applied a mood meter. Engagement would have been probably a different term, but mood meter sounds pretty cool. So this mood meter had 6 different options. If you were going to walk into that sales floor and you were on fire that day, then you would call yourself 1, I'm unstoppable. I'm going to meet my quota probably in 6 hours. But then, let's say you hit some traffic, things aren't going so well on the home front, you might be a little frustrated, your sales quota, your performance isn't great, your manager's on your back, maybe you're frustrated. 5 would be the selection. And sometimes we're just not in the mood. So there was a 6. Now, what Sears did is they collected 80,000 moods every day for 15 months. Probably going for the whole Skillsoft 13 trillion thing. 80,000 moods, think about that. All day long for 15 months. The mood ratings were then correlated into the sales numbers. And guess what they found? Sears was able to prove, to develop that causal relationship. And they found that when the moods of the store were overall positive, they were selling more peripheral products. Peripheral products were things like warranties, service contracts, high margin. The hardware themselves, the big refrigerators, the dishwashers, have low margin. So it was absolutely delightful to see that they were selling higher margin products, peripheral products, when folks were in a good mood. That's fantastic news. It increased the profitability of the retail stores where we can optimize the mood. So that's exactly what Sears does, is they can now predict the mood of a given store for a given employee and a given manager on any single day. With that information, because it's predictive, they can then come in and apply engagement interventions, videos from Skillsoft, a little, business book summary, tips, techniques, lots of different things to optimize the mood level. Very simple idea, very, very smart, and it contributed materially to the business. Well, I don't know what kind of mood you're in after that story, but I am going to challenge you with the question of, I would love to hear from you, by a show of hands, how many of you feel that your organization is operating at a level 1? Almost 56%. Good. Yeah? See? You're showing up well. Proactive reporting. How many of you are doing a little bit more in terms of pretty spreadsheets we call dashboards and benchmarks? Good, good. Roughly 30%. Isn't that interesting? And how many of you have pulled on the rope, culled your way all the way up to that mountain, to the purple side of the mountain where the view is better, and would say that you have a strategic analytical capability, level 3? Anybody? You'll get a lot of invitations for the coffee in terms of networking. Okay. And how many in the room would say that they're a level 4? Nobody. Yeah. So we ask this question on just about every major continent, and this is what happens. The room is really dominated and represented by levels 1 and level 2, so it's incumbent upon all of us to do more to advance. Now, how do you advance? What are the kind of key things that you will need to do in order to figure out how to move to that next level? For those of you who said that your organization was at a level 1, there are 4 different things that you can do. Number 1, hire an analyst, a data nerd. Make friends with them, borrow them, temporarily hire them. Build the capability internally inside your team. Improve the quality of your data. As the expression junk data in, junk data out, you've got to work. There was a remark today about there's so much scrubbing that I have to do with my data. You've got to work on improving the overall efficacy and the cleanliness of the data. The third thing is to tackle an apolitical project. Here's what I mean by that. Do not go big. Do not take on a talent analytics initiative that is a hot potato inside your organization. That could be disastrous. So take on something that's small, manageable, that doesn't have a lot of politics inside your organization. And then lastly, develop a plan. I did. From a loyalty perspective, we need to do more in order to inform the business about the repeat business that we do with our customers and what we can do and what the variables are. And we're building the capability internally, and I've built a 3-year plan. The number 2, the level 2 among us, 3 prescriptions for you, and that is to move your way out of building manual reports and get yourself some self-service. There's a wonderful, CBA is here with us, there's a wonderful illustration, a Burson case study about how CBA did this and put off so much reporting that was coming in that was taking 7 to 8 hours to produce for one person. They moved it all to an app. Self-reporting is absolutely mandatory at that level. And improving quality of data and its integration into other systems, absolutely essential for a level 2 to move to a level 3. And then building statistical skills. So if you're not going to become a statistician, I'm not, but you do need to become conversant in statistical concepts. We talked about a few today. This needs to be part of our lingo. It needs to be more germane to how we talk about HR. So definitely schooling yourself up on some basic principles and statistics. I do have some recommended reading, of course, at the end of the presentation. So some good reads. Now, nobody was a level 3 and nobody was a level 4. But when you get to level 3 and level 4, it's a lot about using and developing statistical models, data visualization, which means when I take mounds and mounds of data and I'm trying to put it together in a meaningful way, use pictures. It helps human beings. And then when you get up to that fourth state, it's all about optimizing what you do in the third state. Multidisciplinary skills, high levels of influence, because you're going to be producing analytical reports with regularity. You need to be able to sell the findings to a lot of different people inside your organization. So you may be wondering, well, so I need some statistical skills, some data nerds, but what can software do for me? Now, if you're at level 1 or a level 2, there's lots of software for you. Skillport is there. The sum total learn system is there. If you need to comply or monitor, continue to do that, we always will. So that's part of kind of the early phase in the maturation life cycle. Here we have maybe static or single source systems. We're reporting real time things that happened in the past. Interesting way of putting it. And then they're often schedule driven. I need to produce this report monthly, this report weekly, this one quarterly, and it goes to thus and so. But on the other side, when you get up to the 3 and the 4, this is where we have multiple data inputs. This is where we have longer horizons, outward, 3-5 years or so. So much different viewpoint in terms of where we're going with the data. The other thing is visualization tools, as you can see on the right, and a variable demand. There are going to be ebbs and flows when you need business decisions to be made, and these systems can perform. Elixir Analytics is a great example of a software element on the right. The kinds of questions that software can help us do, as an example, how many participants did we have in this particular program? In the middle, as we get into monitoring and evaluating, I might ask, did the leaders that we developed through maybe the I Am a Leader program at CBA produce better business performance? And then the Uber question over at the right is, holy smokes, we have an acute pending crisis with this particular job function, and we need to amplify our recruiting efforts now and well into next year. That's forecasting. Now, I used a term earlier called the data scientist. I was really confused by this because I knew what a data analyst was and I knew what a business analyst was, but I really wasn't sure what everybody was talking about when they said data scientist. So I thought you might be curious too. A data scientist is very similar to the role of the business analyst or the common term of a data analyst. But the unique thing about them is they are data heads who can actually have business acumen and context, understand business process, and communicate the findings in a way in which we can understand them. They help us pick better problems to solve, and of course, they provide us insights on where to go with the findings. So a data scientist is a term you're going to hear more and more about, and it's definitely a different animal than a data analyst. Now I'm going to give you a few minutes here, about 10 minutes. It's going to say 15 minutes on the screen, but I'm going to give you 10 minutes to ask yourselves, where is it that I am, level 1 or level 2 in this group, and what do I think I really need to do walking out of the room today to begin to take larger, bolder steps toward advancing your talent analytics agenda. So we'll give you 10 minutes to do that, and we're going to raise up the lights, and I'm going to walk around the room, and then we're going to pick 1 or 2 tables, yes we are, to share their findings. So it's an opportunity for you to network, see where the other folks at the table are, and what they're going to do differently when they get home. So hopefully a lot of good dialogue in terms of where you are and where your peers are. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that you can avert any kind of common roadblocks. So as we wrap up this session today, I want to share with you some insights that I rapidly wrote down from the subject matter experts. A data scientist or a data geek cannot alone produce an insight. It just doesn't happen. There's a triangulation effect that needs to occur. You need to have the data expert. You need to have someone from HR who knows the HR business process and knows learning in general. And then you need to have someone from the business, a stakeholder from the business in that equation. So at least 3 parties or 3 represented. You might have a larger group, but those 3 stakeholder groups have to be in the room. And ensure, I know this sounds ridiculously commonsensical, but make sure that any project you embark upon and that you put your heart into supports the overall KPIs. What a showing it would be on your next report up to the CHRO if you were able to say, here's what we've done, an analytical study, and here's how it helps us elevate our KPIs in HR. The third is make sure that you can act on the insight before you ever anticipate a study. So if you have a hypothesis, but if your conjecture about the hypothesis is right, will the organization invest the dollars, make the move, invest the people, and the change management involved to act on those findings? Really brilliant. That came from Anshul over at the IBM Watson Center. And then, of course, we have to be very watchful of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is our human tendency to want to pull data into an equation that is going to prove out something that we've always known is the case. That's why we need to have more than us in the room, is to help offset the inevitable confirmation bias that takes over. And then, of course, some of your findings may be quite upsetting or provocative to people inside your organization. You may be shaking up the institution. So you need to make sure that you don't underestimate what years of experience the people have said, we've always done it, and now your data is saying something completely different. You need to socialize that carefully and politically. And then the last one, which is, please don't go too big. Don't be too brazen. Don't ask for $1 million to go out and do all these wonderful things in terms of analytics at your first go. If you have a serious organization that's evidence-based and decision-biased anyway, to use data, great. But most of us are in a place where we need to start small. So this concept of plant the seed without the ask is a recommendation that says, go out and start to do this work, but don't make an announcement about it. Just do the work, get your sea legs under you, and then gain some experience before you make a big announcement that you just left a Skillsoft conference and you've got analytics on the brain. So this is my favorite quote, and it's so meaningful. This is from Albert Einstein, and it says, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. What this really means is you may have a lot of data inside your organizations that it's not material to your hypothesis. So don't get intoxicated about the fact that there's volume and velocity in your data. Make sure you have the right meaningful data that correlates to your hypothesis. And then on the other side of the equation, you may have an incredibly important hypothesis for which you have no data to bring in. It doesn't mean it's not a damn good question. It doesn't mean it doesn't deserve an answer, but you may not have data to support it. Without data, that conversation won't go any further. So I love that quote. We will share the slides with you, and we have some recommended reading, of course, from books 24/7 on this subject if you'd like to learn more. Hopefully I've inspired a few thoughts. We have 2 great videos, and of course, out in the Experience Hub, we can talk to you a little bit about how Elixir Analytics can help you advance your talent analytics agenda. Lastly, hopefully you took some notes, but in the event that you didn't, we wrote down the super smart stuff from the SMEs into an infographic that 5 minutes after I got up here on stage was posted to the Twitter property at Skillsoft APAC. So I encourage you to download that infographic, take it with you as you go back to your organizations. I cannot thank you enough for your time and attention, and I am asking you to take one big, small step toward a bolder talent analytics agenda. It will benefit you, it will benefit our field, and it'll benefit the talent populace in general. Thank you so much for your attention.